Welcome friends to Farm Fresh Designs 59. I hope you like the video today, and if you do, make sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel, and make sure to hit the notifications button so that YouTube will notify you when I upload my next video. So let's get started. My first project today is a wall pocket. Now this is my very last piece of barn wood that I have from my dad's barn that we took all the barn wood off after the land was sold and before they were going to tear it down. So this is my last piece, and I've used it pretty sparingly over the years. So what I've done is I've added a double layer of drop cloth. Now if you've never bought drop cloth before, bring it home and wash it and put it in the dryer, and it makes it super soft. Now it's not going to ravel anything like burlap does, but it will ravel some when you pull those strings. On the sides and on the bottom, I did not finish off those edges, and they have raveled just a little bit, but that's okay because that's what I want it to look like. And up at the top of the wall pocket, it's actually doubled over just to make that part a little stronger when I do put my faux flowers in it. Now the stamp that I'm using today comes from the new IOD spring release, and it's called La Campagne. And it's actually 2 sheets of clear stamps. And the one that I picked out today is the bull or steer. Now it's just a little bit bigger than the wall pocket, so I go ahead and decide what part of it I want to not be on the drop cloth, and it's actually just down at the bottom where his feet are. So it doesn't matter. It's fine that it's like that because I wanted to make sure that his body was on there. Now I used black StazOn ink because I like the way that it does better on fabric. And I also inked it up really heavy because I wanted to make sure that it went on really well. It's different than when you stamp it on something else because that fabric will absorb some of that ink. And also because the drop cloth is a double layer, if the ink goes through, then it's going to go through to the second piece of fabric. Now what I've done is I'm just going to go ahead and glue down on the 3 edges and leave that top part open to put the faux flowers in. Now, one of the things that I had to make sure I did was I not only glued the wall pocket down, but those 2 pieces of fabric, I had to glue between those 2 as well. And then even up there at the top when it's folded down, I had to kind of glue it in 3 different places. Now, I wanted to spice it up a little bit, but I didn't want to put like a fabric bow on it. So I decided to pull out some of my buttons. And if you watched my video recently, I made a picture out of different buttons, and it was a 3D dimensional heart. And it was used with these same buttons, and I like these buttons a lot. And get them from this place that's about 30 minutes from my house. And they just have this big tub of buttons. And I like to go down there and get them because I like to use them for different things. And I'm just putting those on with hot glue. Now, if you notice something, when I put the hot glue down, I kind of wiggle the glue gun around a little bit. And the reason I do that is I kind of spin it around just a little bit, and that keeps them from having a real long piece of hot glue string trailing off. Now, sometimes I still do, but it kind of puts that glue in that one little spot. And I think those 3 little buttons just finish it off just enough to where it gives it that extra touch. Now, this is just some greenery, and I may have gotten it at Walmart. It's just some plain little greenery. It's nothing special. But I also didn't want to put anything in here that had florals on it because I thought it would just take away from it. And with it being barn wood, I wanted it to be more about the barn wood and more about the little bull on the drop cloth than I did about the flowers. But I really like the way it turned out. So what do you think? Do you like barn wood? And also, have you ever been around cows and a bull? Well, I have. My granddaddy had a dairy farm, so yeah, I've been around a lot. Now the next piece is just a bottle, kind of like an old milk bottle that I got at the thrift shop for I think about 99 cents. And what I did was I started off by spray painting it. I'm sorry, not brushing on Dixie Belle Slick Stick because it is glass. And then the next thing that I did was I took some, let's see, what was it? Buttercream, Dixie Belle buttercream paint. And I mixed it with baking soda so that it would be kind of thicker and give it more of a texture to it. And so now what I'm doing is I'm putting the crockery stamp, and that's also an IOD stamp. It's an older stamp, but I love it. It's got a lot of different crockery pieces on it that you can use, and it's been around for a while, and a lot of people use it. So what I've done is I take a piece of air dry clay, and I use the DOS air dry clay, and just kind of put some in my hands, and I roll it around like you're going to be making meatballs, and that kind of warms it up a little bit. And then I've got my silicone mat, and I'm doing similar to like what you would be doing if you were making biscuits. I put a little bit of cornstarch down on the silicone mat so that it won't stick. And then I'm rolling it out with my brayer. But before I roll it out, I put a little bit of cornstarch on that brayer as well. Now, I put a little bit of cornstarch also on the stamp so that it won't stick too much. Now, when I lay it down on that air dry clay, I'm going to roll over it really, really heavy with that brayer, and it's going to embed that design on that air dry clay. Because what I want to do is I want to put it on that bottle as a label. And it's kind of hard to see right now because when you use that cornstarch, you use use to make sure that nothing sticks. Now, once it dries or it's dry enough to the touch where it gets kind of crusty, I use an old toothbrush and I go back and I kind of brush off that cornstarch before I paint it. So you can see the buttercream Dixie Belle paint, and it's got some texture to it. And I glued that piece of air dry clay on it that had the crockery stamp embedded in it. Now, one of the things I did was the air dry clay, I kind of went around the edges of that crockery stamp and kind of pushed down on it so that it looked like it kind of blended more with the bottle. And then when it was all dry, and I painted over the crockery stamp. Then what I did was I went and I used Annie Sloan clear wax paint or clear wax and put all over the crockery bottle. And then I used the dark wax. And it's the Dixie Belle brown wax. Now, I only wanted to put it right there on that crockery stamp. I didn't want it all over. And I pushed it in really heavy. And then I went back and wiped it off because when I put it on top of it, what it did was it went down in the grooves of that crockery stamp so it made those letters in it pop up. But I wanted to clean up the edges so that, wouldn't have that brown on the bottle. And what I did was I pulled out my clear wax again and put that on my paper towel, and I went around those edges. Because it's so important, if you're going to use dark wax, use clear wax first and then dark wax. And if you get too much, right then and there, you need to go ahead and use the clear wax to pull off that dark wax that you don't want anymore. If you wait too long, it's going to be too late because it will have already set up. So whenever you use dark wax and you're finishing it off, make sure that clear wax is close by in case you need it. Now, my next project is just something very simple. It's just an oval piece of wood that I bought at Hobby Lobby, and I painted it with Rust-Oleum white linen chalk paint. And all I did was I sealed it really well before I put the transfer on. And this is redesigned with Prima, and I'll link it in the description box below. I've looked it up, and I don't think it comes with a particular name. I've had it for quite some time because it comes with a lot of different pieces. And all I did was I distressed it around the edges with sandpaper, and that was it. I decided that I didn't really want to put any antiquing gel on it. I wanted it to just be more about black and white. So if you've noticed kind of a theme, it has a lot to do with cows, because my daddy loved cows so much. And once he had his own little farm, he would have cows sometimes. And we would help him, especially when he would have the little calves, and we would go over there and feed those calves with a bottle, because he would buy them at the auction. So they weren't birthed at his farm, but he would buy them at the cow auction. And we would have to go ahead and start feeding them with the bottle when he got it, because they weren't with their mama anymore. So I'm just working my way around it, and I really like it. It says Farmer's Market, and it says, I think, organic food. And when you have a farm and you have vegetables, yeah, you're pretty much eating organic. I know that's what, we don't have any farm animals here, but we always have a vegetable garden. But it's just real plain and real simple, but it's just something that I'm adding to the vignette. And then I'll go back over it with that clear plastic to kind of burnish it down, and then I will actually seal it again. Now my last project today is just a little stool. And it is actually a transfer that I just bought recently, and I really like it. And it also is redesigned with Prima, and it's called Home and Farm. Now, this little stool, I've had it for quite some time. I sell a lot of stools in my vendor booth. And so when I found this one, it was just too cheap for me to not buy it. But it had kind of even ingrained in the wood, carved into the wood, the design for, I think that was Dora the Explorer. And I really hesitated about buying it because it was carved into the wood and then it was painted. And so I didn't know if I really wanted to mess with it, but it was so cheap that I hated not to, and because I sell so many stools. So when I got ready to do this video, I thought, okay, let's just use this thing. So I took it outside and I sanded it really well. And I actually was able to sand it down almost to where it was the original wood, but still there was that imprint. So I used wood filler, and then I used like the little scraper that you put in, and I filled it up with wood filler and let that dry. And then once it dried really well, which I like to go ahead and give it a couple days, then I sanded it down again. Now, one thing that you didn't see, because it's clear when you first put it on, was I used the Dixie Belle Boss, which is something that you would use when you want to cover up something that the stain might bleed through. But I did that more because it had that different wood filler product on it, and I wanted to make sure that once I painted it, it was good and smooth and I didn't have to worry about it anymore. And so this transfer, it says Milk Farm, and it says Providence Ranch, and it has a picture of a red barn. Now, I'm from Tennessee, and when you go down Interstate 40, oh my goodness, it's so beautiful when you start going through the country, and there's all these pretty red barns, and there's silos. And if you don't know what a silo is, it's this big arch-looking like metal contraption, and that's what you put the cow feed in. And when you like grow your wheat or whatever you use to feed the cows, once it's harvested, you put it in the silo. And there's just, when you're a country girl, there's nothing like going down Interstate 40 and seeing all those barns and silos. Now, once I got it all painted, I went on and sealed it with Rust-Oleum Clear Sealer, because that's going to make the transfer go on so much better. And I just take my time and work my way around. Now, one thing I want to describe for you is, yeah, the top of the stool is round, but up at the top where it says Milk Farm, that goes across straight. And I wanted to make sure that it was aligned with the legs. So that was the way that I placed it more than anything, because I didn't want that straight thing that said Milk Farm across the top to kind of be off center. So that's why I put it exactly where I did. Then once you decide to put it down, you go ahead and kind of hover and lay it down, because yeah, once you put that sealer on it, it's good to go. But sometimes if you've got a transfer and you lay it down and then you decide to pick it back up, sometimes part of that transfer will come up. So once you decide where you're going to put it, then put it down. But don't know that you can't pick it up and put it back down without messing up the transfer. And then I just push it all down, and that's my Cricut little scraper that I'm using. And then whenever you're pulling up that plastic, if you feel any resistance, lay it back down and scrape it some more, and then eventually you'll get done. So today it's all about cows and farm and just farmhouse things. And it's because it reminds me so much of my daddy. And my daddy was raised on a tobacco farm, but when he married my mom, my granddaddy had a dairy farm. And so we grew up around cows and going to the barn and helping my granddaddy milk the cows because he had a lot. But there was a lot of grandchildren, so he had a lot of help. So a farm with cows is pretty near and dear to my heart. But I just think that stool's really sweet. And you'll notice that you'll kind of see part of me that you don't normally see is because I'm standing up because my table, and then I put the stool on top, and I can't sit and put that transfer on, so I needed to stand up and scrape it on. So here's all my pieces today. So as you're looking at the vignette, I want to just pull out some things that I haven't talked about. That little tractor is a little metal tractor that kind of represents my daddy because he loved tractors. And those little baby shoes, those were my daddy's baby shoes. And that little lantern looking thing, I found that at the thrift shop. And because it's got a metal roof to it, it reminded me of a barn because a lot of barns have metal roofs to them. So that's why it kind of all goes together. And then that little piece of cross stitch that you're going to see in just a minute was actually something that I cross stitched my daddy a long, long time ago. And I know that after he passed away, and over the years, my mom has given me different things. And because I cross-stitched it for my daddy, probably back in the 80s, she gave it back to me. So it's really special. So everything today is all about barns and cows and farmhouse, because that's just who my daddy was. And tomorrow's Father's Day. And so I'm just so grateful for the influence that my daddy had on me. He was such a good man, and he was so well respected. And there's a bottle that I did recently, and those are his glasses. And yes, he was a smoker, and so a long time ago he smoked Camel cigarettes, and for some reason we still had that box left. So I took it, and I just have like a little vignette at home where I have all the stuff that reminds me of my daddy. And then that little pipe that's in that can, that was actually my granddaddy's pipe. No, I'm sorry, my great-granddaddy's pipe. Because he lived up in the mountains of Tennessee, and my dad actually lived on his farm when he was little. And he smoked a pipe, and I remember going to his house and smelling, tobacco pipe, or pipe tobacco. And it's kind of pungent, but I like that smell just because it reminds me so much of when I was growing up. And there's my little stool. So there's my vignette. And tomorrow's Father's Day. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know which one was your favorite. Make sure to like and subscribe. Guys, thank you so much for all of your support. Thanks for watching. And have a great weekend.